Well, good morning and welcome back to another week on the allotment. And it's 2 weeks now since I made a video. I didn't make one last week because the weather simply isn't allowing any progress. We all know that as gardeners, the seed packets that you sow are a guide. If it says sow February, March, or plant out in April, it's a guide, and you've got to watch the weather. And at the moment, the weather is about 8 degrees centigrade during the day. There's a bitter wind blowing all day long, and at night the temperature drops to around freezing, just above or below. So we've got to go with the weather, and so there really wasn't anything to report last weekend. However, this weekend, it's Sunday today. There's a digger operating down by the hedge line, oddly, at it's 20 to 8 in the morning. I've been a bit lazy this morning. I just got up when I woke up. But the main event is tomorrow, which will form part of this video. And it's a big moment because the nighttime temperatures, tonight going into tomorrow morning, the temperature's falling to about -1 again. But from tomorrow on, the temperatures in the daytime, in the nighttime, rise to about 3 or 4, up to 7 degrees. Well, that's a big moment. That means that there are certain things I can consider putting out now that aren't going to be frozen and damaged. So yeah, that's a good moment. I have had my first crop of rhubarb. Last weekend I pulled some rhubarb and we had a lovely crumble, and that was a real precious moment. That was my first crop off the allotment this year. I mean, it's going to be a few weeks till I get another crop, but the rhubarb, which Terry gave me about 3 years ago now, 3 or 4 plants, it's taken them this long to really establish, and this year they really are putting on a good show. So Cheryl's already told me that we want to freeze some of it, so we shall take a good picking from that. And of course, the other big news this week is the death of Prince Philip. I have to admit, and confess to being a bit of a royalist. I do believe in Queen and country. And as utterly disappointed as I am in Prince Harry and his, I'll be polite, his wife, I think they're an absolute reflection of today's society, where they only consider themselves, and at the complete other end of the spectrum you've got someone like Prince Philip, whose every waking thought was duty, country before self. And then you got Harry and Meghan. I mean, I think he's just stupid and easily led. I think she's nasty and cunning and completely self-obsessed. Anyway, that's enough of those two horrible people. However, we went for a fantastic walk yesterday. We went, it was about 15 miles. Cheryl has one of these Fitbit things which can tell you how far you've walked, which is quite clever. So we walked about 15 miles, and it included going past a number of places that had their flags flying at half-mast. And I'll mention more about that in a minute, because I'm going to go in and get warm, the fire's on, and talk about how misunderstood the term half-mast is. But the big news on the plot, the big news was I had a fire this week. Do you ever, is it just me, or do you ever have those moments when you look back on something and you think, I cannot believe how stupid I was? Just a moment's lack of attention and concentration could have been catastrophic. Anyway, it wasn't catastrophic. When I spotted the fire, I happened to have a full watering can in my hand. So I put it out very quickly, and I'll show you in a moment. It's a bit of an anticlimax, but yeah, welcome along. It's good to have your company. Tomorrow, which will be the majority of this video, is a big day on the plot when I'm going to put my peas in. I'm going to put some spring onions in one of the raised beds. I'm going to plant my main crop potatoes. So yeah, it's a big moment, and I hope the weather plays along. But let's have a look at where I set fire to the old shed. Well, here's the site of the fire. I did promise it was an anticlimax. However, when you see flames, you see flames. I have an old tub that I keep there, which I put all my cold ash in. And the ash comes obviously from the stove in the shed and the Kelly kettle. And I just made a brew in the Kelly kettle, and Les came round the back and we were chatting away, and I was making the brew. And he said afterwards that he saw what I did and thought, oh, that's odd. Because the Kelly kettle had just boiled, and I picked up the base. I mean, I suppose it wasn't hot to, or wasn't too hot to touch, so it didn't burn me. So it must have been a little while after. But anyway, I picked that up and just idly while we were chatting, I tipped the ash in the tub and put it back and thought no more of it. And you know, me and Les finished our chat, and I went down the allotment to carry on with the watering, because we've had 2 weeks of solid dry weather here, and I just, you know, doing a little bit of watering, which is a really odd thing to be doing this early in the year. But anyway, and I was down that end, I just filled a watering can from one of the tubs right down the bottom, and I could hear crackling, and the fire wasn't lit. So I'm looking around wondering what that crackling is, and the tub was on fire, as was the side of the shed. You know, I was so lucky that I hadn't, you know, had a brew, cleared up and left. Otherwise, you know, I'd be sitting in a big pile of ash here. But that's the remains of the tub. The plastic was on fire. It was the plastic, and the plastic has stuck, you know, to the wood. It's, you know, you can't move it. It's burnt on. So, boys and girls, if ever a lesson was needed, don't put hot ash in a bin. Like I say, you know, I mean, I can laugh about it now, but it was a silly thing to do in a moment of, you know, absent-mindedness. And actually, I think it's going to turn out to be a really good lesson for me. You know, in life, whatever we're doing, sometimes complacency can creep in. And complacency is the mother of all evils. I just made that up. So, yeah, I mean, like I say, I can laugh now, but you know, it's a long time since I sprinted anywhere. But I tell you what, I've given Usain Bolt a run for his money coming up here with that watering can of water. And so a lot of this dried wood is now very wet. But and I am aware that in many occasions fires that are seemingly put out can smoulder and reignite. So I kept a very close watch on that all afternoon, and I put another bucket of water on it before I left, and thankfully, touch wood, everything is okay. But yeah, a fire on the plot could have been so much worse. With Prince Philip dying this week, and you know, this situation with flags being flown at half-mast, it resonates with me. It takes me back to a day many years ago when I was the regimental orderly officer at 39 Engineer Regiment, bomb disposal, and it was the day Princess Diana died, and I was having a very mundane, boring duty. I seem to remember it was on the weekend. Until of course a signal came through that Princess Diana had died, which was, you know, was a surprise to everybody. The flags were to be put at half-mast, and then there followed a whole paragraph in this signal of what half-mast meant. And it was news to me that it didn't mean halfway down the flagpole. It actually means the height of the flag from the top of the pole where it would normally fly. So my flag here is 3 feet high by 5 feet long. So my flag would come down 3 feet. And apparently that is to allow, in days gone by, they would fly a death flag above the Union flag that represented the person that had died. But we don't do that anymore. So it's not halfway down the pole, it's down the height of the flag. So I went up onto the regimental headquarters roof and I brought the flag down to half-mast. Several hours later to receive another signal that said Princess Diana didn't qualify for this state compliment, and that all the flags were to go back up. And then I guess somebody in a position way above my pay grade just said, actually this could be a really bad move, this could really upset the people. And so the decision was made, I guess quite rightly, to put the flags back down at half mast. So I learnt that day, with putting up and putting down the flag, what half mast meant. And another little piece of etiquette is that when you put the flag up to half mast at the beginning of the day, or when the decision is made, the flag must go to the top of the pole and then down to half mast. And at the end of the day, when the flag comes down, it should go back to the top of the pole and then be brought down. Now, you won't be surprised to hear I don't do that on the allotment, but I have made an effort to bring the flag at half mast, although it wouldn't qualify because it's not, you know, my flagpole is only a short pole, it's not the full, you know, it's one I've made. So anyway, I thought that was quite interesting, that, you know, half, and we went for a walk yesterday. We actually did 15 miles, damn near killed us both. We saw several flags, and they were all flying halfway down the pole, because, you know, nowadays people just don't know, you know, it's not their fault. They assume, which is fair enough, that half mast means halfway down the pole, and it doesn't. So now you know. You don't get that on any other allotment channel, do you? Culture, that is. Culture. It's a shame to waste that boiling water. I think I'll have another brew. Well, it's now Monday morning, and as it's still my long weekend, I've got today off, got no outstanding work, up here nice and early, and as I said earlier, today's the day that the two main gutters of P. alderman are going in the ground. Actually, this morning coming in the van, it was 3 degrees. The forecast was for -1. So, but we've got a bit of cloud cover, and it's been drizzling, so that's kept the temperatures up. So I'm hopeful for the rest of the week, but who knows. So yeah, putting the peas in today, and my main crop potatoes, Sarpo Mira and Sarpo Axona, and I'm looking forward to that. So quite a bit of work involved in. I'm going to empty out the tubs, put a bit of manure in the bottom, put the seed potatoes in and put the soil back in, and I fill them to within an inch or so of the top, and you know, eventually they'll come through, hopefully. So yeah, big day, looking forward to it. Fire's on, the kettle's ticking over, so I'm going to have a brew, wait till it's proper light, and then we can make a start. Well, that's the peas watered in. Very happy with that. That's one row. I've got 2 pieces of Harris fencing, and I'm going to grow 2 rows of peas on each side of each piece of fence. So that's 1 row out of 4 done. And I shall, those 2 bits of guttering, I will fill them and put seeds in them tonight, and we'll start again. And that way I should have a successional series of peas right the way through the summer, and we'll freeze a lot of those. So I'm very happy with that. That's P. alderman, which grows 6 foot high, hence the fencing. But on another slightly different matter, I've stopped watching all mainstream media outlets now because of this COVID nonsense. They're not objective, they're not critical, they don't question what's going on, they just go along with it. And if you see them questioning a member of parliament or a member of the cabinet, they just say, you know, why didn't we lock down harder, sooner, faster, longer? They never say, you know, show me the evidence that these lockdowns work, which of course they don't. The science is absolutely clear on that now. Anyway, I watch, you know, I pick up news feeds on the internet, which is what most people do nowadays if they want to find their news rather than be handed it. And two things caught my eye this week that confirmed to me that at birth I was dropped off on the wrong planet. This is not my species. You know, sometimes I don't know whether to laugh or to cry at the stupidity of our society. First one that I saw was that a headmaster or a headmistress has declared that they've prevented all bullying in their school by not allowing children out at playtime. You know, somebody should sack that headmaster. You know, I'm not condoning bullying, but I'm afraid bullying is a fact of life. That doesn't mean you should stop trying to eliminate it, but it will always be there. And not allowing kids out, I mean, can we be any more cruel to children? Any more? You know, I despair of adults and their immoral and unethical treatment of children in the last year. And the second one, I saw this morning, and that is that the BBC are offering grief counselling to its staff over the death of Prince Philip. I mean, God help us. Prince Philip was known for his catchphrase, which was, just get on with it. He didn't suffer fools lightly, and he didn't like all this modern grieving and fawning and self-centeredness and, you know, what I call poncing about. And the thought that people who never met him are being offered grief counselling. I mean, if he was in a grave, he'd be turning in it. Jesus Christ, do we know? I'm going to stop there. I can feel a rant. Well, it is a rant already, isn't it? I'm not sure if I've crossed the line. But yeah, would somebody please tell me where my species is, because I need to get back with them. You know, I'm with Prince Philip. Just get on with it. For goodness sake, where does this end? Anyway, got my cup of tea. I need to calm down, don't I? Cheers. We'll have none of that on this plot. No one will ever be offered grief counselling on this plot. Although maybe if my shed had burnt down, I might have needed some. God help us. Okay, so on this significant and productive day, next job is I'm going to put in some leeks. And if you've been watching me for a while, you know that in the winter this plot gets heavily waterlogged. I've stopped the flooding now with the ditch round the side and various other measures, but the beds still get very, very wet, and leeks that are in over winter in the end start to rot. Now, what I'm going to do this time is just a slight anti-rotting measure. I've never thought about this before, but I thought if I put I've got successional sowings of leeks. I've got two more of these sort of pots in my cold frames here, but they're only about 1 inch high at the moment. But these, I'm happy that they go in now. And I thought, right, these can go in at the bottom, the bed I've designated for the leeks. These can go in at the downhill end, because then these will be ready first, and I will harvest them and slowly work up the bed that they're going in. And, you know, I'm not sure, you know, the difference between the top of the bed and the bottom bed is not a great deal, but each of these beds obviously gets wetter on the downhill side. It's only a very slight gradient, but it's there. So I've thought about that, unusual for me. And these are going in. These are Musselburgh, my leek of choice. Never had a problem with them. They do get rust on them, and this year I've opened the spacing both between each leek and the rows a little more to allow a better flow of air. But it always says in the books that once they're about 6 to 8 inches high and the thickness of a pencil, they're ready to go in. Well, these are well over, I mean, you know us fellas, we have difficulty judging length, but they're well over 6 inches long, and yet they're not even half the thickness of a pencil. So I've never managed to wait long enough to allow a leek to get as thick as a pencil before I puddle it in. But anyway, I figure these are good to go. I've sown them smaller than this before and had no problem, so these are going in next. So I think you can see the grid pattern of holes that I've dibbed. I guess they're about a foot apart and are slightly wider than that in the rows, and those holes are about 6 to 7 inches deep. And because the ground is wet from the rain we've had in the last couple of days, I did these holes yesterday, and because the ground is the soil is wet, the holes were much easier to make and they've stayed in shape. So I think that's the first tip. Make sure the ground is naturally well wetted, and then the holes are much easier to make and keep. Okay, so I've knocked most of the soil off them, and just to make it easier to get the leeks in the holes, I'm gonna just take off some of the root, and of course that will also, not only will it make it easier to drop them in the holes, but it will promote quicker root growth in the long run. And then I think that one's filled in a bit where I've tipped the soil out, but it is literally just a case of going along now and dropping an individual leek in each hole. So I will do that with the God knows how many I've got here, and I'll come back to you. Well, I've miscalculated again. This one pot has provided me with 63 leeks, which have now gone in this bed. I'm going to puddle them in, filling each individual little hole with water, and then, you know, the soil will backfill it of its own accord. So yeah, I've got 2 other tubs or pots. Like I say, they're only 1 inch high, but you know, in another month they'll be ready to plant. Not sure what I'll do with them, but I'll find somewhere, because we do like our leeks. I might interplant them amongst the onions. I don't know. I know that means I'll get smaller onions, but I'm not too worried about that. But anyway, this is now done. All I've got to do is puddle them in, and then we're on to the potatoes. This is going very well. And it's 25 past 7. I'm going to be done by breakfast. Actually, I did forget that I brought up my parsnips from the airing cupboard, a second sowing, or chitting, and crikey have they gone. So I need to get some of these in my parsnip tubs, toot sweet. Well, I did a previous chitting in the airing cupboard, and I planted some of them in this tub around the edges and in the middle, and I'm not sure if the camera, yes it will, see? Slowly but surely those little parsnip chits, seeds, are coming up at regular intervals. Even there's a couple of little ones in the middle, and I'm really pleased with that. And if those ones in the middle don't germinate properly, then I can always chit more and fill the gaps. But very happy with that. With these cold temperatures at night, it goes to show the chitting is worth it. So all I'm going to do is take off some of the top, and if you remember, these tubs have been made up with a mixture of ordinary lawn soil and horticultural sand. Hopefully that means that, you know, they'll have a looser root run, and you know, there won't be any forking, and I shall get conventional parsnip shaped parsnips. But I mean, it worked last year, albeit I only had a couple of tubs, so you know, we shall see. But these, can you see that? These seeds have definitely chitted, and I don't worry too much about how and where. I mean, look at that one. I mean, I probably left these too long, if the truth be told, but I'm not gonna, oops, I'm not gonna worry too much. They go in and they take their chance. And like I say, I'm no horticulturalist, so I don't know which bit goes up and which bit goes down, but they'll find their way. I think the answer in life is not to fuss. They're stuck to the paper and they keep breaking off, but I've got lots of them, so I can afford to lose a few. It's rather exciting, I think. Whoops, pulled another one off, that's a shame. Two stuck together. Ah, there we are. Okay. And that will do. I just need to put some kind of netting over it because we do have some local cats, which I'm very happy about, keeps the vermin down, but they do tend to use these pots as their local toilet, so I need to discourage that. Job done. And if you don't know what a wireworm looks like, can you see that? That is a wireworm, and that will eventually turn into a click beetle. But it's these wireworms that absolutely love potatoes and carrots, and it will burrow in and form minute little drilled holes into your lovely potatoes, and actually it's those holes that the slugs and snails can use to bite in and create a cavity and ruin all your potatoes. So he's history, and I shall carry on looking. I'm feeling really pleased with progress. So while I'm just waiting for the kettle to boil, I thought I'd mention a little story or tale about when I joined man service. I did a 2-year apprenticeship as a boy soldier, and then I went, when I was 18 and I finished the apprenticeship, got my city and guilds, and I went into the man service. And from when you finish your man service and my Royal Engineer specific training, your bridging and bomb disposal, and or not bomb disposal but demolitions and mine warfare, etc. When you finish all that, you could select where you would like to go and serve, and they try, where possible, not always, but they try to give you your first choice. And I wanted to go to the commandos. And I did, and I passed the commando course, and I was doing the commando course while the Falklands War was on. And so I finished the commando course and I joined 5-9 Commando, Royal Engineers, down in Plymouth, which was a dream come true for me. And shortly after I joined them, the guys came back from the Falklands War, and they went on 2 months leave, and then they came back. And at the cessation of hostilities, the Argentinians all around Port Stanley had put mines in, but they hadn't marked the minefields in accordance with United Nations directives. And I know that sounds quite odd, but there are procedures and policies to follow when using mines. You're supposed to mark the minefields. They still do the same job. They deter people and they channel people and so on, but yeah, they hadn't. They just laid them anywhere they chose, and they hadn't marked it. And so 5-9, being Royal Engineers, got involved straight after the cessation of hostilities in trying to find and clear these mines. And unfortunately, 4 or 5 guys very quickly trod on these mines and lost the lower part of one leg, anti-personnel mines, and they lost their leg from about 4 or 5 inches below the knee in most cases. Anyway, I tell you that because my first job when they came back was these guys had to go for daily rehabilitation, and I was allocated to them as a driver. So I would go around first thing in the morning. Some of them lived in the block, they were single soldiers, which was nice and easy, but a couple of them were married and they lived out in married quarters. And I can remember the first morning I turned up to pick up a guy, and I always remember his name because he was a diver, Baz Morgan. They were all lovely guys and I got on very well with them, and I was in awe of them. I was 19, just passed the course. These guys had been to war and had survived, but unfortunately were injured for life. But they all had such a spirit and a sense of humour. And I can remember the first morning it was only a Land Rover I picked him up in, and I parked outside Baz Morgan's house and I had to wait for him to come out, which wasn't long. And I had a bit of a quandary. I thought, because they were going to get in the back of the Land Rover and there's a tailgate. Well, of course, normally a soldier just hops over the tailgate and gets in. You don't lower the tailgate. But these guys had lost legs. So I lowered the tailgate for this guy, and he came up the steps of his married quarter and he walked up to me and he said, "Would you lower the tailgate for a able-bodied man?" And I said, "No, Corporal." He says, "Well, don't you bloody lower it for me. Put it back up." Yeah. So I learned my lesson. You treat them, and I think that goes across the board for injured soldiers, injured people. You treat them as you would other people. He did not want my sympathy, and he certainly didn't want that tailgate lowered. Anyway, I would take them to their rehab. I can't remember where it was, but somewhere down in Plymouth. And then I'd drive them home. I had to wait outside for a couple of hours, so I took a newspaper or whatever, I don't remember, but I had to wait there, and then I took them home. And I got to know them very well, and they became friends. They all carried on serving. Pete Thorpe was a Class 1 warrant officer, and he went on to be the head of the diving school. And Baz Morgan as well was a diver, and he carried on diving. And a year later, we were in Canada, in a place called Meaford, Ontario, for 6 months, building a road through a pretty swampy training area. I think the Canadian engineers must have got mosquitoes everywhere. I thought, "I'll tell you what, let's get the Brits in." Anyway, we had a wonderful 6-month tour in Meaford, Ontario. Magnificent beaches, wonderful people, really, really friendly people. We had a fantastic 6 months. And I wasn't a diver at the time, I was only just in the squadron. But I went with Baz Morgan and the divers. I was as a driver and just to help them lug kit about. And they were doing an exchange thing with the Canadian divers. And of course, Baz Morgan only had half a leg. But the Canadian, you wouldn't have known that when these one of them played for the squadron football team. They were just completely able-bodied. They wouldn't have been allowed to stay in the commandos if they hadn't. They used to pass their basic fitness test, and etc. etc. Anyway, the Canadians dived in wetsuits because, of course, their waters were quite warm as opposed to ours. Anyway, Baz Morgan and the guys finished their dive at the end of the day, and of course, to take the wetsuit off, he pulled it down over his upper body, and then you just lay your backside on the floor, and another guy gets hold of the waist of the wetsuit and pulls it inside out off your legs. Well, he got this Canadian to do it, and all the guys knew what was coming, because Baz Morgan had a certain sense of humour, which appealed to me. And I was watching, I had no idea what was coming. And he pulled the wetsuit off. Well, of course, his prosthetic leg, they were very basic back then, not like they are now. It was just a plastic leg cast. And of course, as this Canadian pulled this wetsuit off, the plastic leg came with the wetsuit. And Baz Morgan went, "Ah, you've pulled my leg off." He used some choice language, and for a split second, this unfortunate Canadian, thought he'd pulled so hard that Baz Morgan's lower leg had been pulled off. I mean, within a split second, the Canadian knew what had happened, and there was some real ribbing both ways. But yeah, they had a wonderful sense of humour. I'm always in awe, and you know, 30 years later, you know, in Afghanistan, when guys had even more serious injuries, their spirit and their determination to excel was something inspirational. In fact, one guy who lost both legs, a guy called Mickey Yule, in Afghanistan, lying in his bed in Camp Bastion, he said, I'm going to be the captain of the British the Paralympic weightlifting team. That was in 2009, I think. And he was looking at the British Olympics in 2012. Well, you know, his rehab took longer than he thought and he never quite made it. But he was captain of the British Paralympic powerlifting team in Glasgow, I think it was 2014, at the Commonwealth Games. How about that? He'd only just lost his legs and he was still in hospital at Camp Bastion, but he'd already decided that this was not going to hold him back. And I've got a feeling, you know, I've lost contact with these guys, but I think he's now a male model. I mean, he was a bit of a bodybuilder, so his upper body, I mean, from his knees up, you know, he was a thing to behold. Yeah, these men are, you know, I'm in utter awe of them. Anyway, slightly interesting story. Well, the sun has come out. It's a beautiful morning. So I thought I'd have a walk up the plot. And the blackberries over there on that frame are looking good. And the stinging nettles around the bases, I don't mind, because I'm going to use those to make nettle tea fertiliser. The onions here have overwintered. And these onions, these sets, were put in a couple of weeks ago. Oh, maybe a little bit more, and you can see they're just greening up now, and as they get the green tops, then I can see where the rows are easily, and I start hoeing. The josterberry there is greening up and looking good, and the rhubarb looks ready for a second picking. I've started using one of these barrels, but with the rain we've had, I should be able to leave them alone for a while. So moving up the plot proper, there's the peas I put in this morning, and beyond that the leeks. I'm still doing the potatoes, another bed of onions there. I've put the sweet peas in. They're not really moving yet. I think it'll take a while for them to adjust to the outside temperatures, and then they should start to move. Beyond the sweet peas are the beetroot, multi-sown. Again, not looking great at the moment, but as the temperatures warm up, I'm sure they'll romp away now that the ground is good and wet. Starting to get flowers on the strawberries, which is nice. And that enviromesh is coming off the broad beans today, so I think the cold temperatures are just about done. Blackcurrant bushes looking good and healthy and very green, and then the garlic bed all coming away nicely. You can see the difference between the autumn sown and the spring sown, and then that is now a dedicated gooseberry bush bed. Again, that's looking good so far. I have suffered a bit with sawfly, which completely defoliate the plants, but I think the fruits still say okay. But yeah, it's all looking good. And lots of seedlings coming on, broad beans, marigolds. I won't bother you with that, but there's my little workstation as I sort out the potatoes, and the pond is an absolute picture, full of tadpoles, I'm pleased to report, which is always nice to see. Frogs are an allotment's friends. Soon have the marsh marigolds up and out. So, right now, could not be happier. The plot is looking good. Got to finish those potatoes and my cup of coffee now. Well, it's just gone lunchtime, and I'm going to make that do for today. Those potatoes took a long time because I'm sifting through the soil that's already in the tubs looking for wireworms, and I pretty much found 1 or 2 in each tub, but no more than that. And some didn't have any, but I found a few. Anyway, so I had to keep sifting through it, and it took a long time. But anyway, the job's done. So today I've managed to plant my peas. Planted up 1 full bed of leeks, and I've done my potatoes. All my second early Charlotte and my main crop Sarpo Axona and Sarpo Mira are now in the tubs, and most of them have got those drip tray somethings under them, and so when the weather warms up I'll be able to fill them with water and try and keep them a bit cooler. So yeah, very happy with what I've achieved. We just need the night times to warm up a bit now, but very happy. I hope you found something to keep you occupied and interested through the video. Thank you for joining me. Thanks to all those who subscribed, and thanks to all those who leave comments, positive or otherwise. Positive or otherwise. I'm not sure when I'll post again, because next weekend we've got a family event, and the weekend after that we've got our first long weekend away in the caravan. Yeehaw! Unless of course the government can come up with another excuse to keep us all locked up, but I hope not. So look after yourselves. I will post another video as soon as I can, and until then, goodbye for now.